So good afternoon in Izmir, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, thank you so much for inviting us. I'm Daliana.
I'm Florian.
We're from SHAU, as Maurizio has wonderfully explained. First of all, thank you so much for inviting us, Yassar University, Faculty of Architecture. Special thanks to Mauricio for inviting us over. We are 5 hours away in Singapore at the moment. And yeah, we are happy to be here and see that the room is full of people. So today we would like to give a presentation titled Performative Materialization in a Semi-Informal Context. And for us, this is important, how we are trying to apply our architecture, our design in a context such as Indonesia. As Mauricio has explained, Florian and I came from different trajectories and different worlds. I'm from Indonesia, Florian's from Germany, and we happened to meet in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam. And we work for separate architecture offices. Myself, I work for OMA, MVRDV, and West 8, where what I've learned throughout my working experience is that architecture contributes and gives statement towards societal and urban issues. Meanwhile, at UN Studio, Florian designed performative envelopes and other geometrical forms. And then we meet again at TU Delft. And this is fantastic because this is where we met Mauricio. And Florian did his PhD and finished it at TU Eindhoven. And he is now associate professor in practice at the National University of Singapore, where we live at the moment. So we have affiliations between practice and research and teaching all the time. This is an overview of our projects. So we do not specify ourselves in a certain typology or a certain program, but we are very wide range, from very small scale libraries to very big master plan projects, including a vice presidential palace at Nusantara, the new capital. So the project range is quite wide, and we are fortunate to have been recognized within certain global and as well as regional awards, where we try to see where we are in our design at the moment.
So when we're introducing ourselves, we used to use like a normal world map, which you know, with a Mercator projection. But at a certain moment, we realized actually it's not representing our world and the world we're operating very well, because it's, you know, very much focused on the global north in a way. So we switched over to this the Maxium world map by Buckminster Fuller. And it's based on an icosahedron. And what we like about it is sort of it projects the continents in different parts of the world more equally, more you know, as it is in relationship to each other in size. But by, you know, cutting this open and unfolding it, you can create your own context, and that's exactly what we did here. So our, you know, point of life or our anchor is Indonesia and Singapore. So we made a little bit more of an Asian-centric unfolding. We put the Americas far away because we're not operating there; they're not so important for us. And at the same time, we put a climatic map as a background. Because also this unfolding where you see the equator as something continuous, this is something that we can learn from around the world. So because, you know, coming into Indonesia, especially for me, maybe not so much for Daliana, for me was also a process of unlearning and relearning, especially with this, you know, semi-formal context. From Europe, you know, you do your contracts, you do your drawings, you send in your BIM model, everything should be clear, ideally speaking. But in an Indonesian context, it's much more informal. It's much more of a you know, negotiation process. A plan is not necessarily something which is sort of set in stone, but something which you also need to negotiate and need to be flexible during the construction process. So in that sense, if we look at the equatorial regions, I think we as architects can learn a lot from other tropical climates and solutions and implement that in Indonesia. So we want to look at the architecture a little bit from a different side, not necessarily from a global north perspective. And this is what is expressed by this map. So coming to the notion of performance, a lot of our buildings, especially the microlibraries, they're sort of making use of passive climatic design strategies, meaning they don't have any air conditioning, but still we want to provide a comfortable space for people. And this is expressed in form of this psychrometric chart, where you see human comfort usually, or thermal comfort, is between 20, 25, 27 degrees, and then depending a little bit on the relative humidity. So the hotter it gets, then you need to reduce the relative humidity. But if you see this plotted hours over the year, Indonesia, also Singapore, where there's a tropical rainforest climate, you have a very narrow bandwidth of, let's say, 20 till 35 degrees, 34 degrees, but relatively high humidity. And if you look at this hedge comfort zone, you can increase this window by shading, by reducing radiation, solar radiation, as well as enable with cross ventilation, so you can cool people. And the interesting part also is that in comparison again to the global north, you have a much more narrow spectrum of temperature. So you don't have to deal with cold winters, and you don't have to deal with hot summers. You don't have to deal with these extremes, which means you can generate a relatively open buildings so that they don't need to be that airtight in order to be comfortable. At the same time, close to the equator, if we look at this diagram on the top left, we have sunlight, direct sunlight coming from south in December, and from north in June, and of course March and September in between. So in comparison to Europe, you and Turkey as well, for that sake, you have to design building envelopes and building orientation differently, because the sun comes in a relatively steep angle from south and north. So you have to take both directions into consideration. There is not a sunlight-free, direct sunlight-free north side of the building. So with that, this heavily influences, of course, the building geometry and orientation in the layout. So you strive for relatively slender volumes where you can have a lot of cross ventilation, the long facades towards north and south for easy shading. So why is this important? The energy demand for air conditioning is growing, and is growing with the rise of the middle class. And it was already mentioned before that our energy consumption needs to be in a way monitored and ideally, of course, reduced. And if you look at the top right diagram, then we see that at a certain moment, the energy demand for air conditioning is surpassing that for heating. And that, of course, happens due to a growing middle class, a growing demand, but also if global warming continues, then you need to cool more, and then you need to invest more energy, which in result leads to more global warming. Now, looking into the energy consumption per capita, United States is by far the most consuming country, but India, Indonesia, Brazil, other countries, which grow economically, they will also then have a huge and more energy demand. So our idea is that we do not deny anyone in air conditioning, but we try to get into this position where building performance, building envelope performance sort of can curb these peaks, or can, in general, contribute to a lower energy demand for operational energy. And this is what all our architecture in a way is trying to do. Here we can, of course, learn from the vernacular architecture. And what you see here is Rumah Panggung, which is a house on stilts. And this is a sort of typology which can be found throughout a lot of regions in Southeast Asia, not only Indonesia. But the idea behind it is a timber construction, because plants are growing very fast in this region. Bamboo, timber, rattan, and they're traditionally used as construction material. And in a way, you see with these building elements, there are shutters, you can close it, there are overhangs for protecting for the rain, but you have this trellis on top that you still have a lot of cross ventilation, you have high ceilings. And in opposition to, let's say, a hot, arid desert climate, you don't want to work with thermal mass, because through the clouds throughout the night and the day, there's very little which you can discharge thermal mass and radiate it into the night sky. So there's also not much temperature differences throughout the night and the day. So you have like 30 degrees all over the year. So a breathable, permeable architecture in terms of cross ventilation and breeze that's what you actually find in most of these regions.
This is a selection of Indonesian traditional architecture, which acts as a climatic device for the families, the traditional users. It is very much important is the thick roof, and as well as the porous walls in the tropical climate, and the porous floor as well. And the fact that they are mostly housed on stilts, so they're elevated from the ground. So these are drawings made by the students of Florian at the NUS, and we take a lot of reference from the traditional architecture because it has been there for so many hundreds of years, and it is considered very valuable to see what has been done natively by the people. But as well as it creates socio-climatic spaces, which is where culture programmatic uses are embedded into the architecture in such a way that is not separable from each other. And it is important, we think, to see architecture in that way, that it is never separated from the people, from the users, from the culture. And it is also important to note that in today's Indonesian contemporary architecture, these are works from our senior colleagues, and there has been a shift from architects designing expensive villas and resorts in Bali towards public architecture. So this is recent development in Indonesia, where there are works from Andra Matin, who just won an Aga Khan Award, but also works from Yori Antar and friends who are revitalizing traditional villages in rural Indonesia, as well as other public buildings such as libraries and mosques especially.
So to give you a very short introduction about Indonesia, what you see here, this is a rice paddy field, a sawah, which you encounter across Java with banana plantations in the back. You have, for instance, here in Bandung, that's where our office is located. It is in the highlands. It starts 700 meters above sea level, so it has a very fortunate climate. Is a little bit cooler than Jakarta or Singapore, for instance, but you have like this tea plantations. So you have very rich and diverse nature in also, I mean, because it's a very huge archipelago. And, apart from its own tradition, of course, it has also a little bit of a package and a load in form of positive as well as maybe can be seen critical colonial architecture. So you see here the Gedung Sate from Dutch architect Gerber from 1920, neoclassical style mixing in vernacular elements in the architecture. Gedung Sate, it's called because you see this little stick on top of the roof, the satay stick where you have this little meats like a shish kebab, Indonesian version, which gets fried. So that's the nickname of the building because of this little stick on top. And other buildings like this Hotel Savoy Homan by Albert Albers from 1939, which is a sort of Art Deco style. So we have this very rich heritage, which in a way is also something, seen critical, but at the same time a source of pride and needs to be maintained and needs to be managed in a way. Because we have other problems like, urbanization, a lot of people migrating from rural areas, traffic jams, pollution. So you see here, that's an image of a pasar tradisional. I mean, the word bazaar. Pasar is the Indonesian version. And so this is like how the everyday life of people looks like. And this is also what we try to help and to improve in a certain way with our architectural work. a lot of people are living in a situation like this, which is called a kampung. Kampung is a village. It can be, is completely neutral in terms of its terminology. It can be in a rural area, but it can be also a village in a city. And here it's underneath a flyover. So you see, this is like makeshift buildings. Actually, it's not too bad. I mean, we were walking around quite often in there. We even toured once Vinny Mars around when he came. So it's a quite an interesting, grown structure. However, one needs to be careful not to sort of dwell into some form of slum romanticism, because in a way it still has its problems like electricity outage, undersupply, waste management, and so on and so forth. And then if you go to the capital like Jakarta, which is really a massive city, where the city itself is, I think, 10 million, but the larger metropolitan area is 30 million people. And because of lack of public works, you have, annual flooding. So you see here, this is Bundaran HI. This is the very central big roundabout, a very important place for the capital. And with this sort of ongoing problems, Jakarta sinking, rising sea level, and the problems of flood and the flood control, which happens both as a threat from the seaside, but also from rainwater, as I said, and the sedimentation in the Ciliwung rivers. So it becomes sort of almost unmanageable. So one does not know where to start and where to end, which also led then to a decision by the Indonesian government under Jokowi. There were plans over several years to move out the capital, and now they're finally making it happen. So there will be a new capital in Kalimantan. That's how it's called in Indonesian. Internationally, people maybe also know it as Borneo. It's an island to slightly northeast of Java. So the idea behind is to relocate the capital into a sort of more disaster secure zone. So there's very little earthquakes. And of course, bringing the capital more central into the country, that other more, let's say, disconnected parts of Indonesia have sort of equal access. We will also talk a little bit about the project there, but this is sort of very in a nutshell what Indonesia is about, architecturally speaking, from our point of view. And with that, Daliana will explain now projects from us.
Let me take you from the last slide of Florian, the new capital, to Bandung. So Bandung is the place where we grew as an office and where a lot of our earlier projects are taking place, including this very first micro-library in Bandung. It's called Micro-Library Bima. So we have support from the city of Bandung, as well as the Muslim foundation called Pocket for the Poor. And it is situated on a 500-meter square plaza where there is an existing stage, and we elevate the volume, clad it with 2,000 ice cream buckets to allow the multi-programmatic activities underneath in the outdoor space. So in a way, this is already a semi-informal project engaging different stakeholders, such as public authorities, but also foundations, as well as the communities. So each of the bucket, one is closed, one is open, and we made some coding, 0 and 1. And with this binary code, if you read it out loud, that means it's a repeating sentence that says books are the windows to the world, which happens to be the message from the mayor of Bandung, who is also an architect, by the way. So this is a very interesting way to put in a message on a facade which looks random, but actually it's not. The context is very interesting as well. The plaza is surrounded by several middle-class housing, but mostly lower income housing, which is built along the river. So it looks like this. The river is seen as the backside of the house, and these are where our users are from, the lower income kids. There was an existing stage, and we decided, instead of taking away the stage which they're already using, keeping the stage, extend it, and then put a volume on top of it. And we were considering a lot of different material for the facade in the beginning. So we were searching around what kind of secondhand material is available. And we found, in the beginning, we found jerry cans. So these are like plastic jerry cans where you put water or oil to sell it to the people. But at that moment, we could not have in the enough amount of used jerry cans that we were offered that they will produce new plastic jerry cans for us. So we said no, because that's defying the purpose of using reused materials. And so luckily, after searching hard over and over again, we found another material which is even better in this regards due to its size and availability, is the ice cream buckets. So there are many weddings in Indonesia, and every time there is a wedding, there is ice cream. And this is exactly the ice cream buckets used in the weddings, and every wedding uses 5 or 6 buckets. And then over the time, there is a secondhand market that collects it. And all we had to do was to contact many of these online sellers. And then after 2 months, we managed to collect 2,000 ice cream buckets. So we clean it, we make holes, punch holes in some of it. And it is also interesting because if, say, we are in Indonesia where everything is done manually. So even though we have a clean file, we cannot just send the file to the printing machine and then it will be done by robots, which we would have done if we would be, say, in Switzerland. But in Indonesia, there are a lot of manual labors, and even the tool for punching the holes for the screw is also made manually. So this is where, say, the file to craft happens. And we value this process very much. How do we, as architects, have to communicate and be creative about how to do it from our 3D file to the implementation on site? So this is some photo of the assembly. It's a structural frame. And then this is where part of the ice cream buckets are being installed. So this is in the evening from the outside. When the light is on inside, it acts like a lantern. So performatively speaking, the ice cream buckets, it is very good that it provides cross ventilation. And then it also filters the sunlight, the heat of the sun, but allows enough natural daylight for reading. So the stage is also, with the volume on top, is shaded and rain protected. So it both the program upstairs and downstairs can be used simultaneously. This is the interior view of the daytime, where there is the light does not have to be turned on, and it's enough for reading. There is an extra sliding door for rain protection, which can be opened when it's not raining. And that neighborhood has a lot of activities, such as this is an open clinic where there is a baby clinic going on every month. And there is activities such as reading and doing crafts together. And reading is not indeed an interesting activity for Indonesians. It is an activity which needs to be reintroduced and socialized. So there are many other activities besides the libraries that is happening, besides reading, that is happening in this library. So for us, engaging the stakeholder, making a mechanism, if you like, how to deal with the communications, the negotiations, that things can work in place. So the communication design is also important, not only the architecture design.
Coming now to the microlibrary Barakayu, I would say this is maybe the most successful recently, which we have built and constructed, and we could learn a lot from this process from the microlibrary Bima, which we have just seen. The difference here is we did not work only solely with a contractor, but Kayu Lapis Indonesia is a wood manufacturer in Semarang, and they have a factory. So that was a little bit of a different process. And nonetheless, quite interesting one as well, because in a way it was very experimental. So you see here, this is the library, and it's a house on stilts. So this typology in a way works very well for us, because you have this protected enclosed book volume on top, and then you have this informal space underneath where people can gather, and it's an extension of the public space. And in this case, it is situated as a parking lot. And with that, we add shadow and shade, and people have it comfortably. It's also like made entirely out of timber, mass engineered timber in form of finger joint laminate and plywood. And it's the first completely FSC, Forest Stewardship Council certified building in Indonesia itself. So the timber is locked in Kalimantan and then shipped to Semarang, but they have like reforestation program and so on to grow new forests out of the logging what they harvest. It is situated next to a major road and a food court. So what we try to do there is, it doesn't need any toilet because the food court has a toilet. It doesn't need anything else because, people can grab food there. And the difference to the previous library, Bima, is that it is more at a traffic artery. So it is serving a little bit a wider audience, or has a wider catchment area than the previous one, which is only for a very small neighborhood. Here you see a little bit towards the Kampung Pelangi. So Kampung again, the village, and Pelangi means rainbow. You see this signage up there on the hill. So there's a lot of upcoming middle class people working and living there. There's a school nearby. So it's a quite interesting setting to get people attracted towards reading and bring them into a library. As for the design process, so when we were commissioned by Kayo Lapis, we had a discussion at the beginning of what materials to use, and their request was, can you use a little bit of our timber products? And they're producing mainly, as you see here on the left side, this not only, but flooring materials, or this decorative glued together timber materials, which you find also in a lot of restaurants and bars in Bali, for instance. But we said, like, yeah, what else do you have? Because it would be actually quite interesting to, instead of having a material mix of concrete, steel with wood or whatever, could we make this library entirely from timber? So we visited the factory and we had a look into what are their capabilities in terms of manufacturing, as well as material availability and material strength. And from that, we started a bottom-up design process. In that sense, what can we do? And part of that, again, in terms of climatic performance, is the envelope, the brise soleil, which in a way, together with the roof, shades the interior, reflects the light diffusely in the inside. And we found this also quite interesting because we based this on a construction method, which is called the Zollinger construction, which we remembered from our earlier education, was developed in the 1920s in Germany, which is a reciprocal system where one board holds two other boards, and it's usually used for wide-span roofs, but we used it as a sort of wafer system, self-standing. So basically, it's really just standing on the platform and then holding itself, as a self-standing facade element. So in a way, it reminded us to a scale pattern, and the scale pattern then we related to the Warak Ndok, which is the icon of Semarang, which is also insofar relevant because it's sort of a multi-ethnic icon which has different influences from different ethnicities. So it looks a little bit like a goat, like a dragon with scales and whatever, but so it has Arab, it has Chinese, and it has all sorts of different influences of different people coming together. And so we call, therefore, the library Warak Kayu, so the wooden Warak. But, instead of designing it from that side towards a expression of the building, so it is really an outcome of explaining it in a way, as a result of the design process, and then coming up with this idea also as a communication device. Because in a way, what is very important in this setting in Indonesia, in this formal, semi-informal context is, to make people understand and how you communicate a project that people can accept it and will like it. With the ice cream bucket, it was relatively easy because everybody loves ice cream buckets. But then with this one, we sort of, made a story work for us, for our sake as well. Part of this construction is then, this building of this mock-up, this one-to-one mock-up. And this was super instrumental and very, very important because only sending files there and only sending drawings there is not enough. So it was also a great chance for the workers at the factory to learn something. So we could go back and forth. We could test out details. We had a very interesting ping-ponging back and forth design process with their engineering team. We could look at, does this detail work? Does the material quality work? And so on and so forth. So the labor, the workers in the factory were used it as a, for their training. But then also later on, the contractor who has never assembled something in timber also could come and have a look into this sort of one-to-one model and check out how these details are working. And here you see, this is like how this mock-up, which you saw previously in its entirety, sort of was built up. So we wanted to test here the stair with the seating stairs. How does the flooring connect? How does this handrail or let's say this trellis, which is sort of lockable later, how does this connect? So checking all these details. Then here you see a zoom in of this Zollinger construction. You see this one board is then cut in an angle that it perfectly hits the required angle so the bolts can go through perpendicular. How does it work with the round holes and the long holes in the middle, as well as this corner detail, which was very intricate. So we have two different corner details on each opposing side, how that can work and can be manufactured. And then finally, you see here again the detail of the facade, how it comes together on the floorboard. So basically, it's working with a wedge, which is pressing these boards apart, and they're sitting in a groove. And since they're sitting in a groove, they cannot move. So it's like a friction joint in that sense. So this was a very interesting design and communication process to do something which has never done before in this sort of even though small scale. And as also Daliana mentioned earlier, now in this process, communication is the issue. So working with like one-to-one mock-ups and working with directly with the material is crucial, because sometimes this high level of abstraction from a 3D file only or from an elevation is not giving the best results in terms of architectural outcome. This is the explosion. This is also used as a drawing inside the library. So this mounted there, so people who are interested in the construction can see that maybe there's some form of, although little, architectural or tectonic education in the library. Here you see one elevation when the curtains are open, so it can entirely be cross-ventilated, and if there's a gentle breeze, then it's a very comfortable space. But also in implementation of play features. So what we learned from this Beamer and the earliest microlibrary is, in order to attract kids, and this is of course the most important, if you want to say, target group, is to bring them there. And in microlibrary Beamer, kids from the neighborhood were always playing football, so they were there, right? So we didn't want to place the library on the ground, because we would take away the reason why people there in the first place. But here, something like that was not existing. So we installed play features in form of this swing and this hanging net, this hammock on top, to sort of, also make the building itself, the usage of the building, attractive to kids. And then hopefully that they also grab a book then and have this in a good memory and want to come back. So basically, in a way, creating incentives for people other than books to come to the library. Here the seating stairs and the stairs, how you get up. The stairs are then used for storing the shoes. So it's a shoe-free library. and the interior with the curtains open and diffuse light in the inside. So similar to other library, you can use this space without artificial lighting. And here, at the same time, the river was previously rather dirty, was then cleaned up by the city and made a neat space. And finally, how the use of the library. So you see, these are all photos and images from social media, how people are using it and how it is in an everyday situation.
Continuing to an urban design, which we did, but also including the microlibrary inside. So this is in Central Java. The city before was Semarang, and this is Yogyakarta. They are next to each other. It's in Central Java. So what we like about this commission is that we could work together with the public Ministry of Public Works, and together we identified which spaces would need some architectural or public space intervention, a sort of acupuncture, if you like. And this we did in a month or two, very fast, to identify which is possible to do at that moment and for the first phase. So in Indonesia, it is important that places like this kampung neighborhood is retained, but at the same time, the drainage, the street profile, the pedestrian network has to be secured. So we worked also in this program to elevate that to a certain level, that there is hygiene, there is design, and there is a green element in it. And by including this within the implementation, it gives space for children to play, bikers to bike, and people in the evening feels more safe with the existence of street light, which is designed by us. So this intervention also includes additions of public space and playground, where on the left there is a graphic of circles and curves that is meant to provide children with traditional games that they play every day, but also it is a creative interpretation of the sewage treatment plant that was built by the contractor, which was not planned in the beginning, but we have to live with it. So our design in a way adapts changes that happens on site, which was not planned before and has to be carried out immediately. It also includes a flood control post where you can see how high is the water in the river from a distance, as well as urban farming, which has its own community of older ladies, younger ladies, farming and planting some edible garden. So the site for the new microlibrary, which we added to add literacy program, edutainment, if you like, they call it, into this neighborhood because of its proximity to nearby universities. So it is important, we think, that the children in this neighborhood is also given advantage, that they are given reading facility and a place for learning. So we carried on with the strategy of house on stilts, but also to acknowledge that there has been a programmatic use on the ground since the beginning. So it has been used always for wedding because of its proximity to their gathering space at the opposite side, but also for motorbike parking when they need to, and for any other uses that they need. So the reading space is on top again, and we use again the same climatic facade, which is a brisole, a secondary skin, this time made of clay. So we want to do something that looks a bit parametric, if you like, but done completely manually by hand, and only uses an iteration of 5 rotation variation for each of these clay. So it is the same clay shell, but on the metal bar, it's rotated in 5 variation. And we know that we might not get a good contractor for this project because it's tendered publicly. And it is usually not the best contractors out there when it comes to public tendering. So we were ready that it has to be explained at the simplest way. The detail has to be as simple as possible. And still we got this mock-up back and forth to our office in Bandung until we could settle how the clay is secured on the metal bar and how it's rotated nicely. So it's finally built and everything looks fine. It has this sense of imperfection, which we also like. So this is not done by robots. This is done by human hands. And you see there is a slight imperfection, which we think it adds a human touch to the detail. And from a distance, it does resemble the traditional batik pattern, which is the Javanese batik of Yogyakarta, the place where it is located. This is the interior view. Enough light. And it's already used by the local residents for many things, for reading, for praying, for different activities on a daily basis. So.
Good. So we have 2 more projects, this more detailed. And so Rumah Budaya Indonesia Kaya, shortly Rubik. This is a multi-purpose theater in Jakarta. And so this is one of our bigger projects right now. We will have the groundbreaking actually next week. So we run you through this one. And this is in a way an accumulation of what we have learned so far, just on a bigger scale and a little bit more, let's say, high-tech and with a bit more budget, let's say. So the basic concept for this building in this Permata Hijau neighborhood, which you see is from the form, is very small scale, very little big buildings. So there comes this very big building, but it will also generate some form of workplace and positive economic impact for the people around, and also educational elements since it contains a music school. So the basic concept is around the massing of these different functions and programs. So we have the multi-purpose theater, we have the black box, and we have the dance studio. And what usually happens a lot in Indonesia and Jakarta, and maybe to a certain degree also in Turkey, I'm not sure. You tell me later maybe, but buildings are always very closed. Closed in terms of climate, to shut it off, but security is also a very big issue. So, and Indonesia, especially Jakarta, has a lot of shopping malls. And shopping malls use the landscape as a sort of divider between the road, divider between people on foot, and people can only enter if they have a car. So actually, the idea of this building is, to create sort of a big gate to be as open as possible. It's not 100% possible as we imagine, and I will show you in a second, but it keeps the option open for the future that it is a very, very open building. So basically you go into this semi-outdoor lobby and you can go to, and then you can go from there into the dance studio, into the black box theater, and into the multi-purpose theater. So the concept is structured around 3 different elements. One is the landscape and the terraces, which is integrated into this building and of course into the surrounding landscape. But similar to Asawa, also what I showed in the earlier presentation, this man-made landscape has some form of performance aspect. And of course, with an agricultural production, it is there for planting rice, but it's also a water management system. And so as Jakarta is constantly flooded and as well as sinking, so integrating green roof enables us, at least on a local level, to reduce the rainwater, stormwater impact on the sewage system and the flooding. At the same time, when this water is evaporating, it starts cooling the building, and we will use this water as a form of storage in a cistern and in a pond, then for flushing the toilets. The second aspect is this cave and this hidden garden. So this is maybe less of a sort of a performance aspect, but this gate, this entrance situation, but also creating a sort of almost mysterious place which draws people in, is part of this design. And finally, in form of the cladding, the Pucuk facade, where you see these diamond-shaped patterns, is a sort of what we call a cultural climatic envelope. So because it's a very big building with a lot of people coming in, 1,200-seat theater, so they want to have the view. It has to be representative, but how can you protect then the building from overheating due to the solar heat gains coming during the day? So a very short walkthrough of this building. And of course, these are at the moment renderings because it's not built yet. So this is the entrance situation. And as I said, it's as open as possible, but you see still has this security control on the right side where the bags are checked, and it has this sort of lamellas, glass lamellas where people cannot go through. We designed it in such a way that air can blow through. But then also with this idea, if the situation is improving in a way in a certain moment that it is more secure, then you can take this completely away and becomes a completely open building. So if you walk through, you have this lift, then you can go on the right side, you can go into the dance studio. On the left side, you go into the multi-purpose theater. And if you just walk through, you will enter this sort of hidden garden landscape element. And continuing up, you have this stair, which can be then also used instead of just walking up for reading space. Sort of a small library can be integrated here. And finally, you arrive on the top floor, where you then have this great view over the city behind the Pucuk facade, and can from there enter the main hall on different levels. Oh, there's a cat. Different levels. Of the building itself. So this is a sectional model where you can lift away the front part, and you see a little bit how you can traverse through this building, then into this main hall. And again, we use this motif of a Pucuk also in conjunction with these acoustic panels on the side and on the ceiling. And we wanted to give it a more grounded, sort of heavy appearance and solidness in form of local andesit stone. So again, here we are working together with Nagata from Japan, acoustic advisor. Shimizu is the contractor. So there's a lot of also back and forth between materiality, between geometry, between microstructure you need for having a good acoustic performance. And again, it needs to be locally produced. So cost and appearance is something which needs to be closely monitored. And I will show in a second how we do this in all this practicality. That's the view towards the theater itself. It's a multi-purpose theater. This is now the closed version, where acoustic panels are hung from the fly tower in the back. It can be also opened for other performances as well. Coming now to the facade a little bit more in detail, to the building envelope. So as earlier explained, it's a Pucuk pattern. This is actually also a batik pattern, but it's not something which is only local to Jakarta, but can be found throughout many places in Indonesia. And it's basically sort of this idea of these bamboo sprouts. You see that with the black and white drawing. And so one of these design aspects is, how much of these panels do we need to shade, and how much of these panels do we need that we still can look outside. But then again, through our experience and working with other building envelopes, we realized, and Daliana has already explained it with these 5 different elements, that 5 different elements is actually enough to make a gradual change without people realizing that this is 5 distinct different elements. But with this, we have a very limited and reduced amount which can be handled and can be manufactured. So it's actually completely the opposite idea from maybe 20 years ago. Mauricio maybe remembers Hyperbody, that you can say file to factory and you can produce and manufacture everything. So what we try to do is actually, how can we introduce similar ideas, but then with the added notion of performance, energy reduction, but at the same time being manageable and handleable and constructible in an environment, in a context like Indonesia. So like I said, part of this design exercise was mapping out where's the best view. We have denser panels where people are just walking, where it is not ideal in terms of orientation. And towards the east, where we have the east view, we have less facade panels, because also we don't need that much of thermal protection, because these plays are happening during the evening. So when people are occupying this space, then the sun is on the other side, and they're relatively well protected. We did some studies. So the combination of the glazing materials, which has a relatively good solar heat gain coefficient, or not letting a lot of heat into the building, with accordingly 58% visual light transmittance, that in combination with the facade reduces the solar heat gain roughly by 10. Meaning if you have a horizontal surface, you have roughly 1,650 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. And the facade, depending on the position, the deeper you are in this space, of course, the less, but you have between 50 and 150 kilowatt hours. At the same time, we were cross-checking that a little bit with the illuminance, that there's still enough daylight coming in that it can be used without electric light. Resulting in this facade here as the elevation. And the current state of the building is that we are, like I said, next week we have the groundbreaking, the official groundbreaking, but so far a mock-up is built. This is a one-to-one mock-up, so it's actually quite huge. If you see, look at the person on the right and the left, so it's a 3-story high building, but we can test all sorts of material aspects, construction aspects, how things are put together, and does it match our design intent and need for quality. And if you look then on the inside, so you see here we have the ceiling. So the ceiling timber elements, we were not quite happy, so this is already changed. So this mock-up helps a lot also with the client to discuss certain outcomes, and are you happy about this? Can we reallocate budget from one side and put it maybe more in the ceiling? So instead of 9 millimeter, we will now have 15 millimeters of these ceiling elements. Also, like, we don't want to see up there. Can we paint this black? So this sort of mock-ups is, of course, you need a client paying for that, but they're really important in order to have the same baseline of communication, because, again, not everybody can, even if you make a rendering, imagine how this looks in reality. And coming here to the facade, so if you have a look, the panels are not mounted directly onto the diagrid. So they are with a distance. So we insisted of having a spacer of at least 5 centimeters, because with that, sunlight can shine, or a certain amount of light is able to shine behind, and sort of the backside of this panel is not being entirely dark. And with this, we also enhance visual comfort. We have less glare in terms of contrast, in a way that we have dark panels and a bright outside. And in the same way, the holes are also contributing to that one. And at the same time, having this Pucuk pattern. So this is what we, what we mean with this cultural climatic facade. So on one hand, it performs, and on the other hand, or energetically, but on the other hand, it also, gives a certain form of representation and identity to the building. So you see the acoustic panel on the ceiling and on the back side of the wall, where we decided what is the right scale, what is the right materiality. And yeah, so this is the current state of the building. And then at the same time, there is an existing building on the site, and they needed an office building, and originally they wanted to tear it away. So we suggested to the client, please keep it. Let's have first a look. Can we keep this structure? So basically, we convinced the client to have the sort of renovation, and together with Domicilium, friends of us, they designed the interior. So this whole old office or whatever building this was before is then adaptively reused into a new building, giving it a new life. And this is the current state, how it looks. So it is also another interpretation of this Pucuk pattern in form of a cable diagram where plants can grow and also provide a nice view to the outside in form of green, but also blocking parts of the light and reducing the heat gain. And yeah, with this, I hand over again to Daliana, and we have another short outlook. And yeah, then I think we're almost done.
Yeah, we're at the end of our presentation and bringing you to Nusantara, where we won this project 2022 Vice Presidential Palace, among other projects that we also joined the competition. And right now, the groundbreaking was in August. So it is in a way under construction with revisions in the working drawings. It is a super complicated project. It is not possible to do the communication design because everything's changing as we plan it. So this is a picture I took in 2019 when I was a jury for the master plan competition. So it is not a primary forest. So rest assured, Indonesia is not bulldozing primary forest for a new capital. It has been always a productive forest. So in a way, there are eucalyptus plantation, which is used for harvesting into paper and pulp production. That's the kind of site we are talking about. But still, cautious planning, integrated planning should be taken care of. So this is the Vice Presidential Palace design. It is on a 14.8 hectare site. It is a hilly site. So we placed the office and the palace on the top of the hill, and all the other buildings are terracing down. So it's hidden with a green roof. As it is also the idea of the forest city that a lot of buildings are hidden behind the trees, but only the iconic buildings are standing out. And in this case, we would like the palace and the office in one building to stand out and covered completely with solar panels so that it is sustaining its own energy by itself. And the orientation of the building is also according to the sun angle, which is the least surface area on the east and west. So this is now we're trying to work very hard with the MEP engineers and all the green building engineers so that we can achieve this what we intended in the concept design. So not only the solar energy, but also the hybrid cooling system, the rainwater harvesting that needs to work in one integrated master plan so that we can achieve the intention that we want with all these aspects. So it's in progress, and that's about it. We can preview regarding the Vice Presidential Palace. And we would like to thank the all ATI organizers. It must be really a good teamwork, and we wish you success in the coming days. So, Teşekkür ederim. Thank you very much from both of us.
Terima kasih.
Yeah, thank you very much, Florian and Daliana. A great presentation of your projects. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now you're perfect. You're
Yes.
very clear, like in a test.
Great. And this also, right?
Yes.
Also.
Excellent. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Again, I would like to open the floor to questions from our audience, to our guests. Any question? Matthew over there has a question. Can you hear? Sorry, can you hear, guys?
No.
No.
All right, we're dealing with a microphone.
Okay. Hello, thanks a lot for this presentation. I mean, I was really interested because I have been living in Indonesia for a while, and I have seen I remember some of the places you have shown. But throughout the presentation, is one thing that really surprised me is you never spoke at any point about earthquake. And I was there because of earthquake. So that was really surprising. And coming from France, I'm used to that, never hearing about earthquake, and now I'm living in Turkey, and every 5 minutes, everyone in architecture is only speaking about earthquake. And then Indonesia is the same type of area with the same problems, but actually there's nothing about it. I'm really happy to see that you can build such kind of architecture without speaking about earthquake at all. But what are your thoughts about it? What were you doing about this situation? So your design.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons that, for instance, the capital is moving because the site is very much protected from earthquakes, but of course, the other buildings we have shown are not. So Rubik, like any other project, has a team with structural engineers, right? So there's also an earthquake regulation, which the building has to fulfill, and it's doing. So this is very much calculated and is according to what is needed and what is required. And the same goes actually also for Varakayu. So the thing is, like, look, I would argue with Varakayu, it's a timber building. So the engineer also was not necessarily an expert in timber. So because the market does not exist, so you have to, in a way, learn while you design or learn while you go. I would say, I mean, for this side building, I mean, the pilotis, there are 40 by 40 centimeters. They actually, and it stands on 6 legs, they're actually quite massive. So I would say this building is a little bit over-dimensioned for actually, you know, what you could do potentially with a timber construction in this size. So I think there is a lot of, how to say, safety measure in it. But yes, earthquake is an issue. An earthquake is discussed. We also had we had a project once for the Goethe Institute in Bandung, right? And you know, of course, the German Goethe Institute coming to Bandung, they want to mount a flagpole, so they asked us. This needs to be earthquake proof according to German regulation. So they asked us if we can help them obtaining the information with all these earthquake situations that the structural engineer in Germany can calculate that. So I would say it is safe and is taken care of, but maybe from a different angle than, let's say, what we are used in, you know, in Euro or mine context in a way.
Well, let me add to that. The discussion on the earthquake indeed is within the structural design, and it is very limiting, actually, to be honest. It makes columns way bigger than it should be. And we even have an extra regulation that we have to the building has to be able to withhold 100-year earthquake, which does not necessarily happen. And that's really different from Singapore, which does not have that regulation. Therefore, we often look at buildings in Singapore why the columns can be so thin and slim. And then we tell our structural engineer and contractor, please look at this reference. And all they say, oh yeah, but Indonesia has strict earthquake regulation. Therefore, the columns have to be as big as possible. And we hate that. So we try not to discuss it if we don't have to, unless there is a question from the audience. Thank you.
No, but I mean, to also I mean, it's also a material question, right? I mean, the concrete industry is actually quite strong in Indonesia, but that doesn't mean that you necessarily get always a good quality concrete. And at certain moments, I mean, when buildings are built in a very informal situation, what you have seen the kampung in the beginning. So I'm quite sure that people are, you know, saving on these building materials. So these informally built structures, they are, you know, probably very endangered if something really major is happening, that they're collapsing, right? But there's also a process of development, you know, where you need to you know, improve this situation on a larger scale. But you know, if somebody builds informal settlements, you never have this under control in a way.
Okay, thanks a lot. I mean, I hear the same that we are hearing here in Turkey, or same problem and same situation. So thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. Any other question?
I think there are some in the chat.
Hello, can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Indonesia's traditional architecture and weather emphasize the importance of roof design and air quality. It's also a very crowded country with many skyscrapers and slums area. What do you think are the key factors for building better quality structures in such a regions? Do you think we could apply what you mentioned to these types of buildings, slums areas like or skyscrapers?
Did you understand? Did you hear?
So, sort of. Sorry, what was the last one with the skyscrapers and the slums? Can you repeat the last part of the question?
I say to you, do you think we could apply what you mentioned to these types of buildings, skyscrapers or slums area?
You mean the logic of the passive climatic design strategies, as in sort of cross ventilation and shading, and this of the design principles, applying it to the kampung and the skyscrapers? Is that the question?
Yes, I mentioned.
Oh yes, yes. I mean, we are super advocates of not having these glass towers all over. You know, I mean, so we try also, if we do towers, we also try to implement exactly these aspects of you know, external overhangs, trying to have the openings towards more north and south, having a slender floor plan for enabling cross ventilation, all these sort of things, right? But then again, you know, this comes from, you know, then it comes from an architect, and then it always depends on, you know, how much is this in the design agenda of an architect, and I cannot talk for others, right? So you will still see a lot of blue glass, fully glazed, very bland high rises in Indonesia, you know. But I would argue that, for instance, like we had architecture in Indonesia already in the 80s and the 90s, taking care of that in form of, let's say, critical regionalism, local architects, for instance, with the campus in Universitas Indonesia, you know, who try to implement this sort of knowledge and logic from the vernacular into the contemporary. Maybe not so much necessarily only as a performative or climatic aspect, but at least a sort of an identity aspect. And with that, I think it automatically does things differently. And as for the kampung, yeah, that's a matter of education in a way, right? Because I mean, this is growing organically, one after the other, and sort of you fill in a space which is vacant, which you can occupy. And already due to the density, you have, you know, less possibility for cross ventilation and the narrowness of the street. And it is always sort of negotiating with the neighbor what you can do. But I'm not sure if there is sort of a overview or sort of a design strategy where people actually really consciously say like, okay, if I make here an opening, it blows through better, or, you know, I have a cooler building. So I mean, you know, again, if we would design a kampung, right? A sort of low-rise, small scale, then we could implement these design principles. But a kampung is a grown structure, and it's very hard to implement that because people build on basis on what materials do they have available, what budget do they have available, what do they know, and if they don't have any sort of education in that sort of direction, then they basically more or less mimicking what the neighbor is doing in a way, and what they know, or what is in their realm of knowledge and horizon of the possible. So I would say yes, it is possible, but in practical terms, I think it needs some form of guiding person or agency which would say, yeah, you have to do it a little bit that way, because otherwise, you will have a very hot space.
And that agency is not the market-driven developer, which we have worked with several times, because we are also many times advocating what could a tropical high-rise look like. And that would be high-rises, towers, which has several grounds inserted in between the tower. So it creates multiple ground floors as public space, as green space, balconies, places to meet. A lot more openness, not only enclosure in all of the facade sides. And yet this is not very yet marketable to the middle class of Indonesia, who imagines a tower as it should be fully air conditioned, fully enclosed. So this we are also trying in other trajectory of our work to implement this probably in the coming years, depending on the agency. But I'd like to point out a reference made by architect Paul Rudolph. He successfully implemented a tropical high-rise, if you like, in Jakarta. It's called the Intiland Tower, and it has different openings which are unusual for an office space. The maintenance cost is also higher than usual office space, but it is considered, let's say, a modern heritage. So therefore it's maintained. But not everybody is open to such a thing. But we are also looking into that in the coming years. So yes, thank you. It's a nice question.
I think one reference could be also from in terms of high rise from WOHA, at least in sort of openness and public space on higher levels, and a sort of permeability. So I think this is a quite good design reference for the tropics from Singapore. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Should we address those?
Let me first, there was a question here from
Okay.
our colleagues up there. Paola, you had one that's coming.
Hello, and thank you very much for this amazing presentation. Really, you share with us your methodology, your research. It's really also a fantastic example for our students. I would like to ask you, stressing, of course, so much the importance of the material and how effectively the material can be used to constitute the building. If the material is essentially driving the definition of the shape of the building. So how do you define the architectural body? Does it come according to the material, the way you can use it? Or I'm really referring to the design process. So my question is the materiality of the building that you are designing driving the final shape of the building?
Thank you very much. It's a very tricky question to answer. I mean, it's a thing. it's both ways, right? It's a sort of top down and bottom up process, right? Some is determined by a certain simplicity. I mean, due to the box, right? But then again, the infill is more something which then is sort of a design exploration. Of course, if you refer to projects like let's say vault shells made of brick, that would be a very interesting study where you then sort of have a structural form finding exercise and then realize that there's a couple of interesting projects in that respect in India, but so far we have not tried that one in its entirety because I would almost argue that requires your own building workshop. And this is something which is sometimes in the back of our heads, but so far we could not establish that because, having your own contractor and then trying to be experimental in that direction. So I would say the form finding or sort of material experimentation comes in certain aspects, not in its entirety of the building.
I mean, due to the earthquake, we are bound to certain structures which are, say, if you like, more conventional. Otherwise, should there be a very high budget, we would make it very unconventional, but within the safety. So I would say the structure possibility and the budget determine what kind of form and experimentation we are able to do. And within that form implementation, we would insert a range of possible materiality, say for the for the cladding, for the facade, for everything. And for public buildings, we are less experimental. I mean, for a large scale public building, we have to be less experimental than within the micro library series, because for that public building, the maintenance is an issue. The durability of the material is important. So we tend to experiment on how, say, the secondary skin within a certain form and technicality can improve the whole building, but not necessarily the material itself. While in the smaller scale buildings, such as microlibraries, we are brave enough to use different materials, such as the plastic buckets, which is a very difficult material because you have to secure it with a UV protection so that it can stand 4 years under the sun. And after that, you have to replace it every time. So it's like if you have to repaint your house every 5 years, you have to change these ice cream buckets every 4 years. So there comes with this sets of understanding what kind of materiality in terms of durability we are doing as an architect. So it depends on case to case.
Yeah, I mean, what is interesting in this what we call semi-informal context in a way is, the relationship with somebody who's doing your building, who is building your building, and that was like a part of the discussion we had before we had this lecture. What is a month ago with Mauricio? That. And maybe this is similar in Turkey as well, but we find quite fascinating that older architects, who are already practicing longer and who are doing, for instance, single family houses and villas, by now they're not drawing anymore any plans or any sections. What they do is they use SketchUp, because SketchUp, everybody is using SketchUp, is widely available, and they just send a SketchUp file to the contractor. And because they have worked since 20, 30 years with the same contractor company, they know exactly the details, they know exactly which shadow gap, they know exactly which, covering which material, and so on and so forth. So they just send over this 3D file. So in a way, we found it interesting to reflect on it, that it is a form of BIM, where the information modeling is not in the digital file, but in this sort of interrelationship and between people in a way, right? And I mean, this is a fantastic, this is a great thought in a way. Maybe one should write a paper about that one. As a counter to BIM, because this is also something really crazy when we think about it. Now, with bigger projects in Indonesia, they also want to have that you're using BIM for a certain square meter, right? I don't know exactly what it is, but you need to be able to pay the software licenses, and small offices or offices as such. The margins and the fees are much lower in Indonesia. So how can you afford this. We had recently a discussion. We were in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia and had this discussion about BIM licenses. So because BIM is also entailing a certain legal component, but sometimes we have the feeling, and this is again something where we're very critical about where does this come from. So the global north, in a way, wants to sell the BIM licenses, and then without questioning, without being critical, BIM is implemented, but all the other parts which are required in order to manufacture that, in order to have the sort of the legal system, are completely lacking. So you basically, do BIM, but do it not all the way through, right? And that is what we sort of also, try to question a little bit.
Well, it's a complex
Yeah,
discussion.
I mean, this informal aspect is very interesting, right? But I mean, why would you need BIM if certain informations are not then handled in or carried over into the building, right? So then let's do it just a little bit more simple and one-to-one with the person, because BIM is in a way is a tool where you say you over define A, B, and C, and that needs to be executed exactly this manner. But Indonesia, in a way, you hand over a plan, and there's a term which is asal-asalan. Basically, you just do whatever you see the plan, you read the plan, and maybe you build it a little bit according to the plan or your interpretation of the plan. And then you come to site, and then things are completely different, right? So then you need to start negotiating with the contractor, sort of like, being very polite, and I'm sorry, this is maybe not according to what we want, so you have to tiptoe around, right? So it's a completely different way of how architecture gets done and built, and how you have control. And it really depends on interpersonal relationships. How well do you know your contractor? Sorry, we were straying off the question.
I think it's very interesting discussion. I think we, considering the time, we will take one more question, maybe from the audience or maybe from the online. If there is any other question here, maybe we can check one of the questions. You can see the questions, right, Florian?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
You choose, please.
Oh, okay. Shall we choose?
Yeah, I think that will be the best.
Okay. Actually, there is a question about the possibility of a high rise of a mass timber building in Indonesia. Now, this is an interesting question in a way that we are facing issues when it comes to timber material for government buildings, because the wood has to be tested that it should last for 2 hours in the fire, and no suppliers would give a letter of guarantee. So tomorrow, actually this Friday, we're going to have our wood burned, tested in the lab. If it stays for 2 hours, and then we can use that wood. Otherwise, we can't, or we have to find other wood. So this is really an issue, and it makes impossible for a government building to have, say, wooden structure. Although we have designed one in Nusantara, the church in complete wood. So it's not, they will change it into another structure.
I have a slightly different take on this, because this wood burning, I mean, this is some standard procedure you have, let's say in Germany or in other parts, right? So you have to overdimension a beam that it lasts or is stable, structurally stable, according to whatever 90 minutes and what is the requirement, right? So this is done. This is for sure not impossible. It's just like maybe at the moment legally not possible, right? But would it be technically possible to do so? Or would it be culturally possible even? That is a very interesting question, because whenever we come with timber, not many people appreciate it as a material, especially, if about housing, people or single family house, they see it as a sort of a poor man's material, sort of bamboo and timber and this sort of thing. It maybe changes with bamboo in Bali, with Ibuku Bali and this sort of architecture. There's a lot of bamboo architecture, but maybe this is also seen more as a leisure, recreational, tourist thing. So I'm not entirely sure if the market is yet so far that people would accept to either work or live it in a timber high-rise building, right? Which of course brings it to the next point: is the knowledge there? Probably this knowledge needs to also be, engineering and timber construction knowledge, which exists in other countries which maybe developed mass engineered timber, right? This needs to be in a way imported, this knowledge, and if not the material itself, because of course we have laminated timber in Indonesia, but would that fulfill the quality requirements for doing a high rise? So there's a lot of different process involved. There's a cultural element, there's a market element. So in the foreseeable future, I'm not entirely sure if it is realistic.
I mean, on the other hand, if you heard about the building in Singapore done by Toyo Ito, designed by Toyo Ito, and recently it's molding. It's one of the biggest wooden building in Asia, and mold is growing there. That is due to the humidity level. So it has to be maintained in a way in this tropical climate as open as possible, or how it's protected, or how the wood is processed before it is used. So as a structural element, of course, it would be dangerous if it's molding. And at the moment in Indonesia, there is no real structure engineer who would sign for a wood construction, because they do not know exactly how to secure it, because they have to sign it and be responsible for the safety of the building.
So the mold issue, we're talking here about the Gaia and the NTU, and the mold issue, can be manifold. What I remember back in the day, my education in Germany, there was always sort of this notion of constructive wood protection. So you never sort of expose a beam or the heart of the wood. So you have a capping which is inclined that the water can drip off with a dripping nose and whatnot, right? Or you make a sacrificial wood layer which gets replaced. So maybe the problem, and I don't know, lies within that aspect, but that also needs a certain knowledge about how to construct with timber. And if it's not existing, then probably it is going wrong. Another aspect why it could mold is, which I don't know, could be climatic aspects. Not only, let's say, lack of cross ventilation, but if there's too much moisture, that, for instance, you have an air-conditioned space and you use single glazing and it's really cooled down a lot. And then on the other side of the single glazing, you have a lot of condensate because, the relative humidity on the outside is quite high. So you see this a lot with air conditioning single glazed spaces that, on the outside water is running down. If this is starting to go into this timber construction, I don't know if this is the case, then you create a very moist environment where then mold can probably easily grow. So already with these two examples, you see there is a body of knowledge required in order to construct. So I would say it is for sure in principle is possible. And if you see all these vernacular architecture, which is built, of course, from solid wood, not MET, there is traditional knowledge there, but there's also sort of the idea behind, and that is also, I would argue, even in vernacular architecture, whatever, in Europe, that you have a skeleton, you have a structure which you need to protect, and you have sort of almost like a layering of onions, these protective layers which need to be replaced, let's say maybe every 5 years, whatever. You have a roof made out of coconut fiber or whatnot, right? And if this starts rotting, you start replacing. So a building is then also not seen as something, once you build it and that's it. It's a sort of a continuous exchange and renewal process in order to protect the skeleton, right? And I must say, unfortunately, maintenance aspect is very often, also even in Singapore, is not like a strong point. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, but we love our standpoint is that we love wooden buildings, and our building in Semarang, the microlibrary Warakayu, is still doing well in a way that it's not molding. It just needs quite some maintenance, but it is important because I mean we used to build houses based on wood, and why is that taken away now from us, and that as a society we cannot access wooden buildings. I think it's such a pity. So hopefully, yeah, with proper care and know-how, we can do a lot of wooden buildings again. Yeah.
Yeah, with that very hopeful thought, I think we can. Sorry, can you hear me? I'm saying that with that very hopeful thought, I think is a good way to close your keynote. I think we are all here very happy to hear what you have shown to us, and also very happy that there are many questions. I apologize to the people that whose questions we could not answer. It's just, yeah, we are having some time issues here. Florian and Daliana, on behalf of the ATI, I want to thank you very much for your contribution. So we are showing you here, well, it's a certificate of contribution. It's a way to say thank you very much for, yeah, for giving this opening that is now making this conference very promising.